Here's how this thing's gonna play out. You don't bring up Tess. Ever. Matter of fact, we just keep our histories to ourselves. Secondly, don't tell anybody about your condition. They think you're crazy, they'll try to kill you. And lastly, you do what I say when I say it. We clear?
Sure.
Repeat it.
What you say goes.
So here's the thing. When looking at the original 6 Avengers, tracking their character arcs is kinda easy, and a lot of that comes down to the sense of finality for those characters found in Avengers Endgame. Obviously, Tony and Natasha die, Steve retires and I guess dies off screen, Clint goes on to have his own show, but I honestly think the way the show ends, we don't really need to see him ever again and we could just move forward with Kate. Meanwhile, Bruce is relegated to being a side character and liaison to the Avengers, and they've never really done much with him. So the last man standing is Thor, who is emblematic of all the MCU's strengths and weaknesses all at once. The problem with Thor is that his status as everyone's second least favorite founding Avenger means no filmmaker really knew what to do with him or how to utilize him. And unlike characters like Iron Man, who passed hands between several different storytellers but maintained some tonal and narrative consistency, Thor is kind of all over the place. So with all these lore changes, tone shifts, soft reboots, and a still ongoing story, we have to ask ourselves, what even is Thor's character arc? Episode 3 of my still unnamed series where I do character studies on MCU characters. I am not seeing a lot of love for these videos, so the plan right now is to continue until I've finished the original 6 Avengers, and maybe I'll continue this series into 2024. In fact, here's a challenge. The plan right now is to keep this series active until at least December. That's 3 videos after this one for the next 4 months. If by the end of the year we can get an average of 300 views per video in this series, again, an average, I'll keep them coming with Spider-Man, Black Panther, and a few others throughout 2024. Deal? Deal. I think Thor serves as an interesting case study for the subjectivity of art and how we view our favorite characters, and that argument is 100% based in my own experience with trying to understand Thor over the past decade. See, when Ragnarok came out, I thought I understood Thor's arc and how it dealt with his relationship to the title of king. At the beginning of Thor 1, he has his moment to shine to become king, taken from him, which is part of a ploy by Loki. And the plot of that movie is about him gaining humility and realizing that he has a lot of growing left to do before he can truly be king. And while he ultimately doesn't grow very much in Dark World, the ending of it does reinforce this idea that Thor sees himself as worthy to be a protector of Asgard, but still not its king. And then Ragnarok comes along, and things get very interesting. Thor is forced away from Asgard for many years, and now he's forced to come to terms with being without his father. It shows the flaws in Odin's rule in sharp clarity, but that's also represented by the previous villains. Laufey, Loki, Malekith, and Hela all represent different ways that Asgard has affected the larger universe around it, and how Asgard and Odin's imperialistic rule may have led to Thor's comfort in life, but at the detriment of others. It's no surprise Thor in the first movie is a brash, arrogant asshole with a penchant for killing things. That's the kind of man the old Odin was, so that's the kind of person he'd create. And by ending Ragnarok with Thor becoming the king of his now nomadic people, it gives him the opportunity to be the kind of ruler his father couldn't have been, one more dedicated to the preservation of all life rather than the expansion of an empire or other selfish desires. From an arrogant young man who would be king to someone who didn't want to be, to someone with the potential to be the greatest king his people have ever known, the journey of Thor across these first outings in the MCU, not counting the Avengers movies because he has absolutely zero character depth in those,
He's adopted.
is complete and compelling with plenty of opportunities for growth. And much like Iron Man and Captain America before him, the end of Thor's trilogy is both a satisfying conclusion for the character and a step along their wider Infinity Saga journey. The problem lies in the fact that Infinity War and Endgame throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to Thor's development. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Infinity War and Endgame, and the character work in it for the most part. I think that what Thor's got going on is interesting, but it doesn't really build upon the arc as I had perceived it up to that point. Rather, for me, I find that it recontextualizes his previous adventures and takes his arc from one about his relationship to the mantle of king to one of his relationship with trauma and his responses to it. Thor is easily the MCU character who, up to this point, has lost the most. He's dealing with losing his father for much of Ragnarok, and with new context, his comedy takes on new meaning. Now we can read less as the filmmakers taking a different direction, and more as a facade that Thor is putting on, a way to mask the pain. But by Infinity War, he puts on a new facade, that of the angry, vengeful Thor. I know people say this was peak Thor, and don't get me wrong, this is by far Thor's coolest look. But it still reads to me as a front. He's trying to let go of jokey Thor and allow angry Thor to take over because he's trying so hard to just block out his pain and convince himself that if he can kill Thanos, all of his problems will go away. I think the only really genuine moment we get from Thor in Infinity War is his conversation with Rocket, specifically at the end of it.
Well, if I'm wrong, then what more could I lose?
This feels like Thor's true self poking through for a single moment, all of the pain finally coming through in a split second of true vulnerability. Much like Steve, Thor thinks that the best he has right now is to jump on the grenade. But where Steve came from a sense of nobility, Thor truly feels like death would be a better alternative to living with the suffering. He asks what more he could lose because he truly believes this is rock bottom, not realizing that Thanos is capable of inventing new depths for him to sink to. By the beginning of Endgame, Thor was very much on his Linkin Park shit. He tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it didn't even matter. Thanos still won, still found a way to make Thor lose more than he ever thought was possible, and it broke him. And so Thor retreats into the comfort of masking the pain with a joke, but the mask slips far more easily now, and the pain is too great to disguise with comedy. I know people didn't love Fat Thor, but I think the shock on a first-time watch really still works, and what it has to say about Thor's mental health works pretty well for me. I like the way they portray his deep and profound depression in this, very tuned out and detached. Thor's weight gain shows a layer of humanity he's never had before. Yes, even the God of Thunder can gain some weight after a few years of improperly dealing with a lot of trauma and complex emotions. And the resolution to Thor's mental health arc is so great. It avoids an outlook of toxic masculinity that Rocket can just slap Thor into feeling better. At the end of the day, he just needs to talk to his mom, and I think there's a real power in a statement like that. I also think there's a lot of power in this moment, Thor's utter surprise at Mjolnir responding to him. The idea that he thinks his failure, his depression, and his problems made him unworthy breaks my heart, because I can relate to that, and I know plenty of you can too. Your depression does not make you unworthy of the love and support of those around you, and it definitely doesn't make you unworthy of hammers. I love that Thor's abs don't magically return and he can still be portrayed as a badass and capable person despite his size. And I love that we don't end with Thor having magically found completion as a person. It's his acknowledgement that his problems come from a lack of self-acceptance and a declaration that he's gonna find new ways to grow and become the best version of himself. That's awesome, and I love it, and once again, it serves as a complete arc that leaves a lot of room for him to grow. And once again, they throw that all out to do something completely different. Listen, I enjoy Love and Thunder, I enjoy the Guardians, I enjoy Jane, I enjoy Valkyrie, I enjoy Gore, I even enjoy the fucking goats. I do not enjoy what was done with Thor. The opening scene is fun, but it sets up a flaw for Thor, one that exists as a major regression, even more than when we find him in Endgame. Thor finds himself in a spot where he believes the only thing he's good for is fighting, which feels like a bastardization of the lesson he learned in Endgame. The lesson there was that Thor needs to accept who he is, but this is framed as Thor not allowing himself to be a functioning person in favor of just being a big pile of muscles and lightning meant only for the destruction of the wicked. And it feels so reductive, so dishonest. Thor was meant to find himself and finds only another facade. And the alleged true self he finds, being a dad, doesn't come from anything we already know about Thor. What the movie's trying to say about Thor's inability to love or let himself be loved isn't a trait that's ever really been explored, but is essentially introduced entirely in this movie. And it doesn't really have anything to say about it. It's just telling you, hey, Thor wants love and to be loved, but he won't let himself. And then Jane dies, so he loves this child he never met before. That sounds weird out loud. There's no real building to it, especially when the idea of Thor rejecting love is wildly contradicted by his awkward love triangle with his weapons, and his immediate willingness to try again with Jane. And it's not based in the countless instances of trauma that we've seen Thor endure, which are all reduced to a joke, but in a breakup that happens in a flashback, which is for a relationship that most audience members don't really care about. So by the end of it, any character arc Thor might have had has been reduced to atoms, but with nothing to replace it this time. Why did this happen? Why did so much effort go into crafting and recrafting this character for it to ultimately end up nowhere and still persist into the future? It's not the Russo's fault or Taika or any single person. It's a result of what happens when storytellers don't believe in their characters. Marvel made Iron Man and Captain America work and work consistently because they believed in them. But Thor? Thor shows the unfortunate reality of the way Marvel likes to handle things that they don't believe in. If the audiences aren't resonating with it, either rig it up to be like other things so it's more marketable, or dump it entirely. If the Shakespeare vibe isn't working for people, then why not go more Guardians? That made money, that got great reviews, so let's alter the essence of our character to make him make money. That's Thor's character arc to me. Going from a true thunderbolt with limitless on-screen potential to a pathetic sparkle of a character running out of steam. Special thanks to my buddies Omar, Christian, and Devrick for donating to the $10 tier on Patreon. If you want to be worthy of the benefits, please go ahead and donate using the link below. It is as little as $3 a month. I post, again, once the strike ends, I have to keep saying this, once the strike ends, I will go back to posting current movie reviews. But in the meantime, I am still going to be posting bonus content for certain videos, like the Lotus gag reel, highlight reel of our watch through. Is going to be up there soon, and a bonus video for the next video, the next big project that I'm working on, that's also going to be on there, so please go ahead and subscribe. I would really appreciate it.